The show has been on the air since December 17th, 1989. That's 35 years. Give or take, depending on when you're watching this. More than 800 episodes, 37 seasons and counting. And I've probably seen a third of those at least twice, which is a fact about my life I'm entirely at peace with. It is the longest-running animated series in American history, the longest-running sitcom, and the longest-running scripted primetime program in the entire history of television. Not in its category, not just in animation, in all of it. Every genre, every format, every network that has ever put something on a Sunday night. And across all of that, across every single one of those 800-plus episodes, nobody in Springfield has aged a single day. Bart Simpson is still 10 years old. Lisa is still 8. Maggie is still working on that same pacifier. Homer still works the same job at the same nuclear plant for the same ancient man who can never quite remember his name. The town resets after catastrophes. The characters forget things that should be permanent. The same mistakes get made in the same house, on the same street, season after season, and nobody in Springfield ever stops and says, "Hang on, something here is not quite right. Tonight we're going to say it." Not in the way you might expect, though. The predictions, the famous ones, the Trump presidency, the faulty voting machines, the Super Bowl scores. Those have been covered at length, and they're genuinely fascinating, but that's not where we're going. The Springfield location debate, the radiation theory in its broad form, the floating timeline taken on its own. We've spent time on those. They're worth your time. Tonight is about something more specific. We're going into the family, into the actual people who live at 742 Evergreen Terrace, and the people next door, and the people across town who the show keeps circling back to season after season, as though it's been trying to say something about them and keeps stopping just short of saying it directly. We're going to look at what all these episodes have been quietly constructing about who these characters actually are underneath the jokes. The darker readings, the theories that don't require you to believe the writers were running some elaborate long-game conspiracy. Only that they put something in the footage and it accumulated, and it's been sitting there this whole time. Some of what we're getting into tonight you'll have encountered before, in pieces. Some of it less so. All of it, once you've seen it, tends to stay with you. The kind of thing that surfaces when you're watching a rerun and a line lands slightly differently than it used to. There's no urgency here. The Simpsons have been around long enough. They can wait a bit longer while we take this slowly. So, where we're starting is with the most personal theory in the whole conversation. The one about Homer and a crayon and a choice he made that changes the way you watch every single episode that came before it and after it. There is an episode of The Simpsons, Season 12, Episode 9, Ho-MR, which aired on January 7th, 2001, that the show has never quite reckoned with. Not fully. It arrived, made its point, got its laughs, and the series moved forward the following week as though nothing in particular had happened. But what happened in that episode is one of the darkest things the show has ever done to its main character. And what makes it dark is not what's done to Homer, it's what Homer chooses. The setup is this. Homer becomes a human guinea pig at a medical research lab, and the X-ray turns up something unexpected, a crayon. Lodged in Homer's frontal lobe, a crayon that Homer apparently pushed up his nose when he was 6 years old and has been living there ever since, pressing against the part of his brain responsible for higher cognitive function. The crayon is removed. Homer's IQ jumps to 105. Now, 105 is not genius level. It is not remarkable by any external standard. But relative to Homer's baseline, and the show plays this as a genuine transformation, it represents a fully functioning adult, someone who reads, someone who thinks before he acts, someone who, when confronted with a problem, can actually track its components and arrive at a response that isn't driven entirely by immediate impulse or appetite. He connects with Lisa in a way that has never quite happened before. He helps her with a science project. He has a real conversation with her. Not one of those moments where Homer accidentally stumbles into emotional resonance, but an actual, deliberate exchange between two people who discover, slightly to their amazement, that they can talk to each other. Lisa cries with relief. It is, in a very quiet way, one of the most genuinely affecting things the show ever put on screen between those two characters. He also writes a report about the Springfield nuclear power plant. A detailed, coherent safety report about the violations and the contamination and the risks that Homer has been sitting next to for years without the cognitive capacity to identify them. The report gets the plant investigated. Burns is furious. Regulatory jeopardy for once feels real. And then Homer has the crayon put back, not because Burns forces him to, not because some external circumstance makes it necessary. Homer makes the choice himself. He asks Mo, his friend who runs the bar he drinks at, to reinsert it. He does this because the version of himself without the frontal lobe damage was, in the ways that mattered most to Homer, easier to live with. His friends didn't quite know what to do with the smarter Homer. The bar felt different. The world had a texture of loneliness to it that the previous version simply didn't notice, because the previous version wasn't noticing much of anything. He leaves a note for Lisa. The note says, "I took the coward's way out." He knows that is the part the theory keeps returning to. Homer Simpson knows exactly what he is doing. He understands the choice he is making in the brief window when he is capable of understanding it, and he makes it anyway. He chooses to be less than he could be because being more than he could be was painful in ways he decided he couldn't sustain. The show plays Homer as a comedy episode. It has jokes. It has the usual rhythm and structure of a half-hour Simpsons. But underneath the jokes is a specific and rather uncomfortable claim about Homer Simpson. One that the series then largely filed away and moved past because what it implies is too significant to sit with for long. The implication is this: Homer's stupidity is not simply a fixed trait. It is not just who he is, the way his voice is who he is. It is, in part, a condition that he had the opportunity to undo and chose not to undo. Which means everything Homer has ever done, every failure, every moment of genuine harm inflicted on Marge or on his children, was done by someone who had a window, who looked through it, and who closed it. The theory that follows from Homer doesn't require you to read Homer as secretly terrible. That would be too simple and also wrong. The theory is more uncomfortable than villainy. It holds that Homer is a man who looked at what genuine presence in his own life would cost him. The altered friendships, the loneliness, the world suddenly having friction it didn't have before, and decided the cost was too high. And that every subsequent episode of the show, every time Homer stumbles into something disastrous because he simply wasn't paying attention, carries the quiet weight of that decision underneath it. Consider what it means for the episodes with Bart, the ones where Homer's inability to really engage with his son's internal life leaves Bart effectively alone in a house full of people. The show has always played those as the comedy of an oblivious man. The Ho-M-R reading plays them as the comedy of a man who knows, somewhere in there, that he could do better, and has been carrying that knowledge since at least January of 2001. And then there is the note itself. He wrote it to Lisa. The note is written to Marge, not to Bart. To Lisa, the one person in the household whose joy at having a father who could meet her where she was had been so visible and so rare that it was almost painful to watch. He chose her as the person he owed an explanation to, which means he understood clearly and specifically that she was the one he was leaving behind. That is not a punchline. That is a man saying goodbye to a version of himself that his daughter deserved and that he couldn't hold on to. The show moves past it, the way it moves past most things, and the next week, Homer is back at the plant in his usual state, and the reset button has been pressed. But the note stays. it is in the footage. And every time you watch Homer not quite understand something that an engaged father would understand, it is in the background of that scene, quietly. He took the coward's way out. He knew it when he wrote it. And the show has been living in the shadow of that line ever since. Abe Simpson doesn't quite make sense when you look at him carefully. In flashback episodes across the series, there's a version of him who's sharp, decisive, competent in the ways a functioning adult is competent. The wartime Abe, the young father, the man before whatever caught him. And then there's the Abe sitting in the Springfield retirement castle telling stories that contradict each other, losing the thread mid-sentence. The show attributes this to aging mostly. Season 9, Episode 17, Lisa the Simpson, which aired in March of 1998, attributes it to something else: genetics. Lisa starts worrying that she's getting stupider. Small things at first, she raises the concern with Abe, and Abe tells her, with the blunt delivery of someone sharing long-accepted fact, that it's the Simpson gene. The men in the family get progressively less intelligent as they age. The women get smarter. It's just how things are. It's just what happens to Simpsons. The show treats this as settled, a biological explanation for Homer's condition, for Abe's condition, for the pattern of intellectual diminishment that runs through the male side of the family. The gene did it. End of story. Except the theory says there is no Simpson gene. Not in the way the show presents it anyway. What there is, the theory argues, is a nuclear power plant. And 2 generations of Simpson men who have spent their working lives in close proximity to it. Walk through the evidence. Homer has worked at the Springfield nuclear power plant since his early 20s. He is the safety inspector for Sector 7G, a job that puts him in direct daily contact with a facility that the show has repeatedly established is leaking, improperly maintained, and actively contaminating Springfield's water, air, and surrounding environment. Multiple episodes, starting as early as Season 1, and running through the later seasons, establish that Burns has been aware of the plant's environmental violations and has systematically blocked or subverted regulatory oversight. The plant is not a background detail, it is an ongoing, active source of contamination. And Homer is the person they put closest to it. Abe Simpson, Homer's father, is a man whose earlier life, shown in flashback episodes across the series, contains clear evidence of sharper cognition than his current state would suggest. There is an Abe who made decisions, who had opinions, who navigated the world with something resembling competence. The show offers this version in glimpses. The wartime Abe, the young father Abe, the man before age caught him. That version looks quite different from the Abe who sits in the retirement home telling stories that contradict each other. And while the show attributes the difference to aging, the theory notes that Abe also worked in industrial environments for much of his adult life, in the same general era when the plant was being established in Springfield, in the same general geography. The women in the family don't follow the same pattern. Marge is not cognitively diminished. Lisa is demonstrably exceptional. Patty and Selma, Marge's sisters, function at normal adult level throughout the series. The women are exposed to the plant the same way the men are. They do work there. They don't spend their days in its proximity. This isn't about the plant being the only factor. The Simpson gene, the convenient, biological, unfightable explanation, is a story that allows everyone involved to avoid asking a more uncomfortable question. Not, why do Simpson men get stupider? But what is being done to the people who work at that plant, and who knows about it, and what exactly is in those files that Burns has on every employee? Here's the detail that makes this theory more than speculation. In Homer, which we just talked about and which connects to this in a rather significant way, Homer removes the crayon and briefly becomes capable enough to write a coherent safety report about the plant. That report triggers regulatory action. Burns reacts not with confusion or concern, but with fury. specific, targeted fury at Homer, aimed at neutralizing the threat. Not oh dear violations, but but this cannot be allowed to continue. Burns has detailed dossiers on every employee. That is established canon, referenced across multiple episodes. He is a man who has been running this operation for decades and who has, throughout that entire time, been aware of exactly what the plant does to the environment around it. The question is actually quite simple. If Burns has dossiers on every employee, and if the plant has the kind of documented environmental effects the show repeatedly suggests it does, what exactly does Burns know about the long-term health outcomes of the people who work for him? And the follow-up question, which is actually the darker one, does the Simpson gene explanation serve someone's interests? Does it help to have a ready story, a biological, familial, nobody's fault story? For why Homer is the way he is, for why Abe is the way he is. It does. It serves the interest of the plant perfectly. It turns a potential liability into a family trait. It turns evidence into inheritance. The emotional weight here doesn't sit with Homer. Homer doesn't know any of this, and arguably couldn't hold the information even if he did. The emotional weight sits with Abe, who at some point in his life was different, sharper, more present, and who has spent the back half of that life in a state of gradual diminishment that everyone around him has accepted as simply what happens to men in the Simpson family. He tells the stories that contradict each other. He forgets things. He sits in the retirement home. And whatever happened to him, whether it was the plant, whether it was proximity, whether it was something in the air and water of a town built around a facility that has never met a safety regulation it couldn't subvert, it is filed under genetics, under family, under something no one could have done anything about, which is, when you sit with it, exactly how it was supposed to be filed. And that's the part I find most unsettling about the whole thing. If you have watched The Simpsons for any length of time, you have a mental image of Ned Flanders, the pink shirt, the mustache, the relentless, almost aggressive cheerfulness, the high diddly-ho neighbor. Ned is the good one, the counterpoint to Homer, the man who has his life together, the quietly devout family man next door, whose main function in the show's ecosystem is to make Homer feel slightly inadequate by comparison. That image is real. But underneath it, buried in Season 8, Episode 8, Hurricane Nettie, which aired on December 29, 1996. The show revealed something about Ned Flanders that it has spent the subsequent 3 decades carefully not fully following up on. The episode begins with a hurricane destroying Ned's house. The townspeople rally to rebuild it. The rebuild is, to put it charitably, a disaster. Every character contributes according to their particular incompetence. The house is structurally unsound, aesthetically baffling, and held together largely with goodwill and ignorance. Ned returns home to find it, and something breaks in him. What follows is a scene that sits completely outside the show's normal register. Ned Flanders, standing in the ruins of what is supposed to be his home, snaps. He delivers a precise, methodical, verbal takedown of every major character in the show. Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, the Reverend, all of them. And what makes it remarkable is that he is not wrong about any of it. He has been watching these people for years. He has been patient with them, kind to them, available to them. And in this moment, the patience runs out, and what comes through instead is something the show has been sitting on. Ned Flanders sees everyone around him clearly. He has always seen them clearly. And it is not a comfortable thing to see clearly. He checks himself into a mental institution. There, Dr. Foster, as childhood psychiatrist, reveals the full history. Ned's parents were freewheeling beatniks. They did not believe in discipline. They did not set limits. They let young Ned do whatever he wanted, say whatever he wanted, express whatever he felt without structure or consequence. By the time Ned was a small child, the lack of any framework had resulted in genuinely unmanageable behavior. Foster, at a loss, recommended an experimental treatment. 8 months of intensive behavior modification. An entirely new psychological structure built over the top of whatever Ned had been before. The therapy worked. It produced the Ned Flanders the show began with. Calm, patient, endlessly kind, deeply devout. A man whose entire personality is organized around control, around the deliberate, sustained suppression of impulse, of anger, of anything that would disrupt the performance of goodness he has been running since childhood. And then the episode ends. Ned is released. He goes home. The show moves on. The theory says, what came out in that parking lot did not go away. It was managed. It was suppressed again. But the thing about a structure built on top of something rather than developed from something is that the foundation doesn't change. Foster modified Ned's behavior. He didn't rebuild Ned. The anger, the perceptiveness, the specific quality of someone who has been watching people fail him for decades while maintaining a perfect surface. All of that is still there. It was there in the parking lot. It goes back under after the episode, but it does not disappear. Maud Flanders died in season 11, episode 14, Alone Again, Natura Diddley, which aired on February 13th, 2000. She was hit by a t-shirt cannon at a NASCAR race. It is, in the show's characteristic fashion, an absurd death, and it is played for a certain kind of dark comedy in the moment. But Maud's death does something specific to Ned that the theory finds significant. It removes the primary external structure of his life, the thing around which the whole performance was organized, the family, the partner, the daily proof that the therapy produced someone capable of giving and receiving love. After Maud, the subsequent seasons show Ned trying and largely failing to rebuild the context that his controlled personality requires. His relationships don't quite hold. His attempts to connect with other characters, including Homer, whom Ned clearly genuinely cares about despite everything, have a quality of effort to them that wasn't as visible when Maud was alive. He is maintaining the structure alone without the partner the structure was built around. And here is the detail the theory finds most revealing. Maud's death was not entirely accidental, not in the narrative sense. The voice actress, Maggie Roswell, left the show following a contract dispute. The character died because the actress departed. Ned Flanders was widowed because of a salary negotiation. His entire subsequent trajectory, the loneliness, the remarriage to Edna Krubopol, the adjustments, and the quiet instabilities of the later seasons, all of it flows from a production decision. The theory doesn't dwell on that as a criticism. It notices it as something stranger, that Ned Flanders' psychological underpinning, carefully built by Dr. Foster's experimental treatment, was then stress-tested by a circumstance entirely outside the story's control. And what the show produced in response to that stress across the subsequent seasons is a portrait of someone whose goodness is real, but whose goodness is also work. Constant, invisible, never completed work. He still says, "Hi, diddly ho." He still has the mustache and the pink shirt. He is still, by any measurable surface standard, the same Ned Flanders he has always been. But the theory asks you to watch the episodes after Maud's death and notice what happens at the edges. The moments when the performance requires slightly more effort than it used to. The moments when something the old Ned would have absorbed with a smile takes a fraction of a second longer to absorb. The moments when the cage, because that is what the therapy built, finally, whatever Foster's intentions were, holds. But holds in the way that things hold when they are under strain. Ned Flanders is a good man. That is not in question. The theory is not arguing otherwise. The theory is simply pointing out that his goodness is not natural. It was installed. And whatever was there before the installation is still in the building. Marge Simpson is the one who keeps everything together. That is her function in the show, her role in the household, and in many ways her identity. The patient, capable, blue-haired center of a family that would fly apart in roughly 48 hours without her. She manages the money when Homer loses his grip on it. She manages the children when the children are in crisis. She manages Homer himself, which is, across every season of the show, something approaching a full-time occupation. She cooks, she cleans, she forgives, she absorbs, she maintains. And Season 6, Episode 11, Fear of Flying, which aired on December 18, 1994, is the episode where the show nearly said what it had been building toward all along. The premise is this: in Fear of Flying, Homer is banned from Moaz and later gets plane tickets for the family after being mistaken for a pilot and causing an airline incident. Marge discovers she has a severe fear of flying, not nervousness, a full, incapacitating panic response. In Fear of Flying, the family gets off the plane. Marge is baffled by her own reaction. She sees a therapist. The therapy eventually uncovers a buried memory about her father, a detail that the show would later call back to in ways that muddy the water somewhat. But what the episode actually does, before the retcon muddies anything, is establish something specific and significant. Marge's aerophobia is not really about flying. The therapist doesn't take long to say so. The phobia is a symptom, a single, visible expression of something much larger and much older that Marge has been managing alone, quietly, without assistance, for a very long time. The episode ends, as Simpsons episodes do, with a degree of resolution. The memory is accessed. The therapy makes progress. Marge will be all right. But the theory doesn't end with the episode. The theory asks, what exactly has she been managing? Go back through the series and look specifically at what the show tells you about who Marge was before she became the person the family requires her to be. She was a good student. Multiple episodes establish this. She had ambitions that existed outside domesticity. She wanted to be a police officer. Season 6, Episode 23, The Springfield Connection, focuses on this. Season 9 explores her non-domestic careers further. She was capable of sustained independent thought, of artistic expression, of intellectual engagement with the world. All of that existed before Homer, before the children, before 742 Evergreen Terrace absorbed it. None of it disappeared. It just stopped having anywhere to go. What the theory identifies across the show's full run is a pattern of Marge coping with that loss through a series of behaviors that the show consistently frames as comedy, but that read under any sustained examination as something else. The compulsive cleaning, multiple episodes sustained enough to be a recurring character detail. The moments of explosive anger that surface periodically and then retreat just as quickly, as though they're coming from a pressure that builds steadily and releases when the valve gives before being suppressed again. The episodes where Marge develops an obsession, gambling in Season 5, Springfield, more Episode 10, cooking and various others, that the show frames as a quirk, but that follow the specific pattern of displacement activity. She cannot address the thing, so she addresses something else with enormous intensity. There's also the particular quality of how Marge performs happiness. Not happiness itself. There are genuine moments of joy across the series, real ones, and the show earns them. But there is a specific mode of Marge contentedness that has a slightly different texture to it, a surface, the smile that is being maintained rather than arriving naturally, the patience that has been constructed from the outside in rather than grown from the inside out. It shows up in episodes where the show gives Marge a scene without an immediate purpose, not a comic beat, not a plot function, and in those scenes, something that is not quite fine sits just underneath. Fear of Flying is the episode where the therapist catches it, where the show briefly allows a professional to say, this person is carrying something and has been carrying it for a long time. But then the episode ends and Marge goes home, and next week she is back in the kitchen, and the carrying continues at the same pace with no acknowledgement. The theory's darkest reading is simply this: the most stable person in the Simpson household has been in a quiet, sustained psychological crisis for the show's entire run. The series has documented it in the phobia, in the rages, in the obsessions, in the performances of contentment, without ever quite naming it. Because naming it would require the show to stop and look at what the family has actually been doing to Marge across the run of this show. And what the family has been doing to Marge is requiring her to be the floor that everyone else stands on, without ever asking whether the floor has what it needs. She doesn't tell anyone this. This is the most important detail. Marge does not tell people when she is struggling. Not reliably, not fully. She manages, she copes, she fixes things. And the only time the show ever got close to having someone say, "Wait, what about you specifically?" was in a therapist's office in season 6 before the plot required her to be better and the episode ended. And then there is the hair. This is a small detail, but it is the one the theory returns to. Marge's blue hair has been explained as dyed rather than natural. The show has joked about it. Various characters have reacted to it with varying degrees of surprise over the years. But the canonical account is that Marge dyes her naturally gray hair blue. It is simply part of her. It is simply what she looks like. The theory is not making a strong claim about the hair specifically, but it notes that the hair is the most visible part of Marge. It is the first thing you notice. It is the thing people comment on and ask about and remember. And it has been there since before the show started, before the children, before everything. It is the one part of Marge that belongs entirely to her. Not to the household, not to the role, not to the requirements of being what the family needs. Whatever Marge built to hold everything in, she has been holding it since before we ever met her. The hair is just how you can see the shape of it from the outside. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. There is a moment in Homer, Fearcraft, the same season 12 episode we've already spent time with, that is easy to watch past if you're not specifically looking for it. Homer, with the crayon removed and his cognitive function restored, writes his safety report about the plant. The report is forwarded to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and inspection is announced. And Mr. Burns, upon learning this, does not react with confusion or concern about genuine safety issues, or anything resembling the response of a man surprised by findings he wasn't aware of. He reacts with the cold, targeted fury of someone who has just had a carefully managed situation threatened. Not surprised, threatened. What sits underneath Homer, drawing on evidence from across the show's full run, is a specific claim. Mr. Burns did not simply hire Homer Simpson. He retained Homer Simpson specifically, deliberately, with full awareness of who Homer is and what Homer's limitations mean for the regulatory environment of his plant. Let's go through what the show has actually established about this relationship. Homer's job title is Safety Inspector, Sector 7G. He has held this position since his 30s and continues to return to it throughout every season of the show. He is, by any measurable standard, catastrophically bad at it. Not occasionally incompetent, consistently, structurally, comprehensively unable to perform the core functions of the role. He sleeps at his workstation. He causes the very incidents he is supposed to prevent. He has triggered partial meltdown scenarios across multiple episodes. He has, on multiple occasions, dropped critical equipment, ignored warning systems, and navigated genuine emergencies with a level of procedural awareness that can most charitably be described as zero. Burns knows all of this. That is not speculation. It is established canon. Burns has detailed personnel files on every employee at the plant, and he has been shown across numerous episodes to have specific knowledge of Homer's record and Homer's limitations. Season 4, Episode 11. Homer's Triple Bypass. Has Burns reviewing Homer's file and noting, with the calm of someone reading from a long-standing document, Homer's history of health incidents and workplace failures. Season 5, Episode 12, Bart Gets Famous, includes a moment where Burns fires Homer for gross incompetence and then immediately rehires him upon recognizing that Homer is too oblivious to know what gross incompetence means. He does not rehire Homer out of sentiment. He rehires Homer because Homer is, in a specific and valuable way, useful. Here's the mechanism the theory proposes. A nuclear power plant operates within a regulatory framework that requires, among other things, a safety inspector who files reports, flags violations, and communicates with oversight bodies. The role exists in part as a structural requirement. The plant must have the position, must have a person in it, must demonstrate that the position is being actively filled. What it does not necessarily require is that the person in that position actually identifies, reports, or acts on the violations they encounter. Homer rarely identifies them. Homer does report them. Homer does not act on them. Homer goes through the motions of occupying a role that provides regulatory cover for a facility that the show has repeatedly established is an ongoing violation of environmental and safety standards. He is the human embodiment of the appearance of oversight. And Burns, who has been running this operation since before Homer was born, and who has, according to multiple episodes, been aware of the plant's environmental impacts for decades, has been maintaining that arrangement with full knowledge of what it is. The Homer episode is the cleanest piece of evidence because it shows us what happens when the arrangement breaks down. A Homer who can think clearly enough to write a coherent safety report immediately threatens the plant. Burns's response is immediate and specific. He does not try to address the violations. He does try to manage the regulatory situation. He focuses on Homer, on restoring Homer to his previous condition, on getting the arrangement back to the form that has been working for him. And it works. The crayon goes back. The report is never neutralized. The regulatory threat recedes. Homer returns to his post. There is a secondary layer here that the theory finds equally significant. Burns's longevity, and we'll talk about the separate theory around Burns's impossible survival at more length another time, has been supported across the show's run by access to medical treatments unavailable to the general Springfield population. He has resources for his own health that nobody around him has. The same man who has spent 30-plus years blocking environmental regulation for his own profit has also spent those years ensuring that he personally has whatever he needs to manage the health consequences of proximity to his own plant. Homer does not have those resources. Homer has a job that puts him next to radiation every day, in a safety inspector role that ensures nobody ever formally documents what that proximity does to him. And when he briefly becomes capable of documenting it himself, the situation is corrected. The saddest version of this theory, and it is a genuinely sad one, is that Homer doesn't need to be a victim in any dramatic sense for it to be true. Burns doesn't need to have sat down in 1985 and planned a scheme to cognitively maintain a specific employee. All that's required is that Burns saw a file, understood what it represented, and made a quiet decision that this was the person he wanted in that role. A decision he has been sustaining without drama ever since. Homer stumbles through his days. He doesn't understand what's happening around him at the plant. He doesn't understand what his job is actually doing, or not doing, for the people of Springfield. He goes home to his family, turns on the television, opens a can of Duff, and the arrangement continues exactly as Burns requires it to. And Burns, in his office at the top of the building, goes back to his other matters. The files are where they've always been. Everything is in order. The Homer episode establishes something about Homer that the theory in Section 1 works through in detail. But what tends to get less attention is that Homer is actually the fourth or fifth piece of evidence for a much broader claim. One that extends from Homer to the entire family, and that lands differently once you consider it collectively rather than character by character. The claim is this: the Simpson family, as a unit, contains a genuinely unusual concentration of intellectual capability. Not just Lisa, all of them. And with the exception of Lisa, who made a different choice, or perhaps had fewer options for making the same choice. Every member of the family has found a different mechanism for making that capability invisible. Start with Marge, since we have already been spending some time with her. She was academically strong before the family. That is established across multiple episodes and is not really contested. She chose a life that didn't use that capability in the ways it might have been used. The choice was made, and it was probably a genuine choice, and it carries the weight of every genuine choice. It forecloses something real. The Marge who could have been is still detectable in the Marge who is, in the perceptiveness and the management capacity, in the occasional moment where she solves a problem with a speed and clarity that the show doesn't quite draw attention to because it would complicate the household hierarchy. Bart is the more interesting case because the show has been actively undermining the Bart is not smart story since at least the middle seasons without ever fully committing to dismantling it. He has demonstrated across dozens of episodes a specific set of capabilities that don't fit the class clown archetype. He acquires languages with suspicious ease. There are episodes where Bart operates fluently in contexts that would require genuine linguistic and cultural competence, and the show sort of shrugs at it. His social intelligence, his ability to read people, to identify what they want, to construct a situation that leads to the outcome he's after, is, in practice, rather extraordinary. He runs schemes that require operational planning, contingency thinking, and an understanding of human behavior that far exceeds what you'd expect from a child who allegedly can't pass 4th grade. The show accounts for this, when it needs to, by attributing it to street smarts or natural cunning, which is a way of crediting the capability while avoiding the implication, because the implication that Bart Simpson is actually quite intelligent and has been choosing not to apply that intelligence in any direction that would change his life is the same implication as Homer's crayon 1 generation later. Season 6, Episode 7, Bart's girlfriend, the Kafur, has a moment where Bart, in the context of trying to navigate a complex social situation, demonstrates a level of psychological insight that the episode uses for comedy, but that is, if you stop on it, rather advanced. He is not applying it well because he is applying it in service of his immediate wants rather than any longer-term perspective. But the capacity is clearly there. The show keeps showing you the capacity and then putting it back in its box. Then there is Maggie. Maggie shot Mr. Burns. We are going to spend the next section on that in some detail, but it belongs here too in the inventory of what this family is actually capable of, because whatever you make of the circumstances, intentional or accidental, a 1-year-old child produced the outcome that every adult character in the show failed to produce. She was the one who stopped Burns, not Homer, whose grievances with Burns are profound and long-standing. Not Lisa, whose intelligence and moral clarity make her the most obvious candidate for some kind of decisive action. Not any of the many Springfield residents who had been directly harmed by Burns' schemes throughout Season 6. Maggie. The broadest version of all this is fairly simple, actually. There is something genuinely unusual about the Simpson family at the level of raw cognitive potential. And the family has organized itself in different ways and for different reasons around making sure that potential doesn't create disruption. Homer has his crayon and his choice. Marge has her role and her managed surface. Bart has his archetype and his refusal to be anything the school system would take seriously. Maggie has her pacifier and her silence. Only Lisa doesn't have an equivalent mechanism. Lisa simply has the capability without the buffer. She is fully in contact with her own intelligence at all times. And the show has been charting what that costs her across season after season, and it costs her a great deal. The question the theory ends on is not why the others chose buffers. That part is understandable. Springfield is not an environment that rewards genuine capability, and the people in that family have seen what it looks like to be fully present in your own intelligence in that town. Lisa shows them every day. The question is why the show keeps giving us glimpses of the uncovered versions, why Homer's genuine competence surfaces in specific episodes, why Bart's real capacity appears in scattered moments before being put away again, why Marge's history is mentioned and then not developed. The theory's answer is that these surfacings are not accidents. They are the show trying to tell you something about this family that it can't quite say directly in a half-hour comedy about a man who works at a nuclear plant. Something about people who had more available to them than their circumstances allowed. Something about the specific shape of a life lived with the capability compressed rather than expressed. The saddest reading of all of it is actually the simplest one. The most functional, the most present, the most genuinely alive member of this family is the one who ended up the loneliest. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The resolution of Who Shot Mr. Burns is one of the most famous anticlimaxes in television history. The two-part episode, Part 1 airing in the season 6-6, finale May 21st, 1995, Part 2 opening Season 7 on September 17th, 1995, was the show at its most deliberately dramatic. Springfield was in genuine peril. Burns had executed a scheme to block out the sun above the town. Multiple characters had been directly harmed by his machinations throughout the season. The question was posed with the full weight of the show's most confident era behind it. Who did it? Who finally had enough? The answer was Maggie. The show's explanation, delivered by Burns himself while recovering and later confirmed, was that the shooting was accidental. Burns had approached Homer's car. He had reached toward Maggie. Specifically, he had tried to take her candy. In the scuffle, Burns' own gun fell from his jacket. Maggie caught it. It went off. Burns was shot. Accident. The theory does not accept accident, not because the show was lying exactly. Burns believes it was an accident. The show presents it as an accident, but the theory asks you to go back and watch the sequence, not for drama, not for the joke, and consider what the sequence actually contains. Burns comes to the car. He reaches for the candy in Maggie's possession. He is reaching toward a 1-year-old child, which is itself a specific act with a specific kind of threat embedded in it. The gun falls from his jacket, or depending on how you watch the scene, is within reach of Maggie's hands. Maggie takes the gun, there is a beat, and then the gun fires. That beat. The theory lives in the beat. There is no moment between Maggie having the gun in her hands and the gun discharging. It is brief. It is ambiguous. The show chose to shoot the scene in a way that does not definitively resolve the question of whether Maggie pulled the trigger deliberately or whether the gun went off in the natural chaos of a small child holding a loaded weapon. That ambiguity is not accidental. The show's writers knew they were leaving it open. The question is, why? Here is what the theory asks you to consider about Maggie Simpson as a character taken across the full run of the show. Maggie rarely speaks, but she has said a few words. This is her primary defining characteristic. The pacifier, the silence, the watching. Throughout the series, in the standard narrative reality of the show, Maggie communicates without language, observes without commenting, and participates in the household's life from a position of apparent passivity. She is the background of the background. She is the character who is easiest to forget is there. But she is always there, and she is always watching. Consider the episode A Streetcar Named Marge, Season 4, Episode 2. A B-plot involves Maggie being placed in a daycare run on Ayn Rand principles, where her pacifier is confiscated. The plot resolves with Maggie coordinating the other babies in a silent, organized operation to retrieve their pacifiers from the confiscating authority. She does this without speech. She does it without any of the adults noticing that it has happened. She identifies a problem, assesses a solution, organizes a group, executes a plan, and achieves an outcome. This is not the behavior of an infant who is simply a passive observer. This is the behavior of a child who is entirely capable of deliberate, effective action when she identifies a situation that requires it. There are multiple other instances across the series where Maggie demonstrates a level of capability, physical, observational, responsive, that doesn't fit the she's just a baby framework the show usually applies to her. She has defended Homer in physical altercations. She has responded to threatening situations with a speed and clarity that other characters who have far more experience and resources do not match. She is not passive. She has chosen, for whatever reason, to appear passive. Now return to the shooting. Burns came to the car. He reached toward the child. He attempted to take something from her. In the context of what we actually know about Maggie, the daycare operation, the physical responses, the consistent pattern of careful observation followed by decisive action when the situation calls for it. The theory asks, is accidental actually the most supported reading of what happened, or is it simply the most comfortable one? The show needed to resolve the mystery without permanently altering its central cast. It needed an explanation that was surprising, that made a kind of sense, and that the audience would accept. A baby who accidentally caused a shooting while a gun fell is all of those things. A baby who deliberately shot a man who was attempting to harm her is also surprising, also makes a kind of sense within the logic the show has established about who Maggie is, but is too dark, too permanent, too incompatible with the tone of a show that was still, in 1995, primarily a family comedy. So the show calls it an accident, Burns calls it an accident, the audience exhales. But Burns, dying in the street, never asked for Maggie and collapsed on the sundial without a word. Not for Homer, whose car it was, not for Marge, for the infant. He named her while he was in no condition to dissemble, while the identity of the person who shot him would have been the most present fact in his consciousness. He knew who did it. He knew it clearly enough to name her specifically, and he covered for her. Not out of sentiment, Burns is not a sentimental man, but out of what the theory reads as a specific, private kind of respect. He reached toward that child, and that child responded, and Burns is old enough and clear-eyed enough to recognize what he saw. The episode never comes back to this. Maggie returns to the couch, to the pacifier, to the background. The mystery is resolved. The show moves on. But the show has been doing something consistent with Maggie across the full run that keeps coming up. It keeps giving her moments of genuine, decisive capability and then putting them back in the drawer. The daycare, the defense of Homer, the shooting. The moments when the watching becomes acting and then retreats back into watching. She is not passive. She has chosen, with an intelligence the show occasionally surfaces and never fully explains, to appear that way. And at least once, in a street in Springfield on a September evening, that choice was briefly and decisively suspended. Robert Underdunk to Willie Jor Jr., Sideshow Bob has, by any reasonable accounting, the most impressive credentials of anyone in Springfield. Multiple advanced degrees, including a doctorate in musicology, fluency in several languages, a deep, genuine love of opera, of theater, of literature, and classical music. He has culture, he has taste, he has, in the specific sense of the word, erudition, a quality that the show has, across 30 years of episodes, used primarily as a punchline. And he keeps losing to a 10-year-old. Season 5, Episode 2. Cape Fear, which aired on October 7th, 1993, is the most famous Sideshow Bob episode, and for good reason. It is a brilliant piece of television, a sustained Hitchcock parody that works as both comedy and suspense. Bob begins sending death threats to Bart from prison, and once released, continues his campaign against Bart, which the family and the Witness Protection Program proves unable to stop. He tracks the Simpsons to a houseboat. He corners Bart. He has him. And then Bart asks him to perform HMS Pinafore. Bob, a man with a doctorate in musicology and a genuine love of Gilbert and Sullivan, performs the entire operetta in full on a houseboat. while Bart stalls for time. It works as a stalling tactic because Bob is constitutionally unable to refuse the request. The music is asked for, and the music arrives with full commitment, because for all his menace, Bob is also, at a very fundamental level, someone who takes performance seriously. The Coast Guard arrives. Bob is arrested again. The theory that sits underneath Sideshow Bob's entire arc in the show is not about his villainy. It is about the town that produced it. Bob is a person of genuine, exceptional capability trapped in Springfield. That is the basic condition of his existence across every episode he appears in, and it is a condition the show has never quite named directly because naming it would require the show to say something uncomfortable, that Springfield does not have anywhere to put people like Bob, and what it does instead is to generate situations that ensure they end up where they need to be for the town to function, which in Bob's case is prison. Consider how he got there in the first place. Bob framed Krusty the Clown for armed robbery. This is established canon. Bob committed the frame. Krusty was convicted. Bob got the slot on the Krusty show. The frame is why everything else in Bob's story happens. But here's the detail the theory lingers on. Bob framed Krusty not simply because he wanted the television slot. He framed Krusty because he had been Krusty's sidekick, a man with an advanced degree doing pratfall comedy on a children's program in Springfield, and he found the situation intolerable. The framing was an act of desperation by a person who had looked at his circumstances and found them so genuinely beneath him that a criminal act seemed like a proportionate response. That's not a villain's logic. That's a person at the end of their rope. Bob went to prison. He was educated in prison, apparently. His credentials are post-incarceration in various versions of his backstory or concurrent. The show is not entirely consistent. And he emerged with a plan to kill Bart Simpson, who was responsible for his original exposure. The plan makes a certain internal sense from Bob's position. Bart, an undistinguished 10-year-old in a town of undistinguished people, managed to identify and expose a scheme that Bob had executed competently enough to fool the criminal justice system. Being outwitted by Bart is the kind of thing that, if you have the personality architecture of Robert Underdunk Terwilliger Jr., you simply cannot let go of. But here's what the theory notices about the arc of every subsequent Bob episode. Bob never quite wins, not because he's incompetent, he's demonstrably not, but because Springfield is a closed system and the closed system produces predictable outcomes regardless of the quality of the agent operating within it. Bob's elaborate schemes fail not because they're badly designed, but because they're operating in an environment where Bart's home field advantage, the specific, local, chaotic knowledge of a 10-year-old who has lived his whole life in this place, consistently trumps whatever sophistication Bob brings to the problem. Springfield beats Bob every time, not through any external clever opposition, through the native density and unpredictability of its own environment. Season 17, Episode 8. The Italian Bob has Bob and his family living in Italy, where he has built a peaceful, productive, culturally rich life. He has found an environment that fits him. He is happy. And then the Simpsons show up on holiday and the old conflict restarts. And by the end of the episode, Bob is in Italian prison instead of American prison. But the fundamental situation is unchanged. He is incarcerated, the Simpsons are not, and the reset has been pressed. The theory's darkest reading of this is not that Bob is a villain who deserves his circumstances. It's that Bob is a person who needed a different town and got Springfield. That the particular combination of his capabilities, his temperament, his legitimate grievances, and the specific environments available to someone with his background in Springfield produced, with a kind of structural inevitability, the outcomes it produced. He became a criminal because the only legitimate outlets were unavailable to him. He keeps going back to Bart because Bart represents the failure that set everything in motion. He keeps ending up in prison because that is where Springfield puts people who don't fit its standard categories. Season 19, Episode 8, Funeral for a Fiend, pushes closer to the end of the line than most Bob episodes, and there is a reading of that episode in which Bob is not simply operating his usual scheme, but is genuinely out of options. The schemes are getting more elaborate because the man running them is running out of things to try. The intelligence is still there. The commitment is still there. The cause, however he has redefined it to himself over the years, is still there. But the available paths are narrowing in ways that even Bob's considerable intellectual resources cannot address. The Cape Fear scene ends with the operetta and the Coast Guard and the arrest. But it also contains something that the theory keeps returning to. The moment when Bob finishes performing, when the music ends, and for just a second, before the arrest, before the machinery of Springfield's consequence system reasserts itself, something real happened. Bob performed something genuinely beautiful on a houseboat for a family that wanted to stall until they were rescued from him. And Bart clapped. It lasted about 4 seconds. It meant nothing in the context of the episode. But for 4 seconds, Sideshow Bob was allowed to be what he actually is in front of an audience that actually heard it. And the theory's saddest observation is that those 4 seconds on a houseboat might represent the longest stretch in the entire run of the show where Springfield's most accomplished resident was doing what he was built to do. Now, talking a bit about Springfield itself as a place, since everything we've discussed tonight sits inside it. The floating timeline is usually treated as a production decision, a practical choice made to keep the show running indefinitely without the characters aging out of their roles. And that is, on the most literal level, correct. The writers made a choice. The choice has been maintained. Bart is 10 years old in 1989, and he is 10 years old in 2025, and the show acknowledges this periodically with a degree of self-awareness that goes from wry to genuinely strange depending on the episode. But the theory that sits under the floating timeline is not interested in the production decision. It is interested in what the floating timeline means within the world of the show, because the show has not simply ignored the question of time. It has actively, repeatedly complicated it. And the pattern of complication across 35 plus years of episodes points toward something more structural than a convenience. Start with the backstory problem, which is the clearest expression of the issue. Season 2, Episode 12. The Way We Was, which aired on January 31st, 1991, establishes the story of how Homer and Marge met. They met in high school in 1974. There is specific, anchored detail in this episode. The period is identifiable. The cultural references are grounded. Homer and Marge at 17 and 16 in a specific American moment falling into whatever they fell into. By the middle seasons, that backstory has shifted. The mid-1970s framing starts becoming the early 1980s framing. By the later seasons, episodes that revisit Homer and Marge's early history are operating in the early 1990s because the show's present-day cultural references have updated and the backstory has updated with them to maintain plausibility. Homer is still 38 or 39. He still has the same job and the same family. But the decade in which he grew up has moved forward to accommodate the shifting present of the show's current episodes. This creates a logical impossibility. Homer and Marge cannot have gone to high school in both 1974 and 1991. Those are different decades. They contain different histories, different events, different cultural contexts. A person who was a teenager in 1974 is a fundamentally different person in terms of what shaped them than a person who was a teenager in 1991. But the show runs both versions of Homer and Marge with equal authority, as though the specific past doesn't really hold. Here's what the theory makes of this. It is not simply that the writers are inconsistent. The inconsistency is too systematic to be carelessness. The inconsistency is more like a property of Springfield itself, a quality of the environment in which these characters exist. Their past doesn't hold because the past in Springfield doesn't hold. Memory is unstable here. History is unstable here. The events that should be anchored in specific times are instead loose, available for re-anchoring depending on what the present moment requires. Think about what this means alongside everything we have already discussed. The Simpson gene section raised the question of what the nuclear plant has done over decades to the cognitive environment of the people who live near it. The radiation theory, explored in depth in other videos on this channel and worth your time if you haven't seen them, proposes that Springfield's contamination is comprehensive enough to affect the basic biology of its residents. What the floating timeline theory extends this into is memory. Specifically, what if the contamination affects not just bodies, but also the reliability of recollection? What if Springfield is a place where the past is genuinely unstable, not as a production choice, but as a feature of what the town has done to its residents' relationship with their own histories? Abe Simpson is the character who makes this theory most concrete. Abe tells stories that contradict each other. This is a running joke in the series. Grandpa says something that conflicts with something he said before, or with established family history, or with simple chronological possibility. The show plays this as the comedy of an old man whose memory is unreliable. But the theory asks, unreliable because of age or unreliable because of Springfield? Abe's backstory is one of the most aggressively inconsistent in the series. He is, depending on which episode you're watching, a veteran of multiple different conflicts in multiple different decades. He claims credit for accomplishments that couldn't all be his. He has romantic histories that don't fit the timelines. He has a relationship with Homer's childhood that shifts depending on what the episode requires. And the show, rather than treating this as a continuity problem to be managed, leans into it, returns to it, generates comedy from it, as though the instability of Abe's past is a feature of who he is rather than an inconsistency in how he's written. Abe is, in this reading, the most advanced version of a Springfield-wide condition. He has been in this environment longer than anyone else in the main cast. He has lived with the contamination, the water, the air, the proximity to the plant for longer. His memory is the most unstable because it has had the most time to become unstable. He is the end state of what happens to people who stay in Springfield long enough. But there is also a version of this theory that doesn't require radiation at all. A version that is simply about the loop. Springfield resets, not metaphorically, literally, houses that are destroyed are standing again. Relationships that should be permanently altered by the events of an episode are restored to their original configuration by the following week. The monorail that tore through the town in Season 4, Episode 12, Marge versus the Monorail, Conan O'Brien's finest contribution to television, does not seem to have left a lasting mark on the town's infrastructure or civic psychology. The comet that threatened Springfield in Season 7, Episode 6, Bart's Comet, is not remembered as a near-extinction event. The episodes in which Springfield is physically destroyed, flooded, evacuated, or fundamentally disrupted have no downstream consequences in subsequent episodes. The reset is total. And the floating timeline is what a total reset looks like, applied not just to the present, but to the past. If Springfield is a place where nothing permanently accumulates, where consequence doesn't stick, where events don't layer, then it follows that the past wouldn't stick either. The backstory shifts because the backstory is subject to the same non-accumulation that everything else in Springfield is subject to. Some versions of this theory connect it to the purgatory reading. The idea that Springfield is a waiting space, a between place where the normal rules of cause and effect don't apply. Others connect it more mundanely to the radiation, to the contamination, to the idea that Burns's plant has been doing something to Springfield's cognitive environment for decades, that the residents have been living inside without the ability to perceive it. What every version of the theory agrees on is this: The floating timeline is not simply a cartoon convenience, it is a property of the world being depicted. Springfield is a place where time works differently than it does elsewhere, where the past is available for revision, where the same year can be multiple different years depending on what the story needs, where Homer Simpson was a teenager in both 1974 and 1991, and both versions are equally true because truth in Springfield is not something that accumulates in layers. It is something that resets. The residents don't notice. They can't notice for the same reasons they can't notice a lot of things about Springfield. But if you watch from outside, if you watch with the accumulated knowledge of the full series and the specific attention to inconsistency that the theory requires, you start to see the seams, the places where the past didn't quite hold, the backstories that don't quite fit together, the town that keeps beginning again, season after season, episode after episode, in the same configuration it started in. Not because nothing has happened, but because whatever mechanism handles the past in Springfield has been running on something other than normal time for a very long time. Season 6, Episode 19, Lisa's Wedding, which aired on March 19th, 1995, is a flash-forward episode set in the year 2010. Lisa is at university. She meets a British man named Hugh Parkfield. They fall in love. He proposes. The engagement is warm and funny and genuinely sweet in the way the middle season Simpsons could be when it wanted to be. The episode has earned goodwill in the Simpsons conversation precisely because it treats Lisa's future with something resembling seriousness. It imagines her having one, and then it doesn't let her have it. The engagement fails because Hugh can't accept Lisa's family. Specifically, he can't accept Homer. The embarrassments, the loudness, the specific gravity of a man who is constitutionally incapable of behaving appropriately at formal occasions. Hugh is willing to marry Lisa, but he is not willing to marry into the Simpsons. Lisa, faced with this choice, chooses the Simpsons. She sends Hugh away. She goes back to Springfield. The episode presents this as a story about loyalty and love. Lisa loves her family. She won't abandon them for someone who cannot accept them. It is framed as a choice that says something good about her character. The theory says, look at what she gave up for it, not Hugh specifically. The theory is not particularly interested in Hugh as a person, and the episode makes fairly clear he wouldn't have been right for her in other ways regardless. The theory is interested in the pattern. Lisa's Wedding is the first major instance of what becomes, across the show's full run, one of the most consistent and quietly devastating through lines in the series. Lisa getting close to something outside Springfield, something that would allow her to actually use what she is, and then being returned to her starting position. Go through the series with this specific lens, and it becomes very hard to see it as anything other than structural. Every significant connection Lisa makes with people who operate at her level ends in departure. Theirs, not hers. She meets the characters, she connects with them, the episode ends, they leave Springfield. This happens too many times across too many seasons to be coincidence, and the show seems to know this. It acknowledges the pattern in various ways, sometimes with comedy, sometimes with a quiet melancholy that sits in a scene for a moment before the episode moves on, but it never resolves it. Season 12, Episode 14, New Kids on the Bletch, and nearby episodes from the same period contains instances of Lisa making connections that don't survive the episode's end. This is not remarkable in itself. The Simpsons format doesn't allow most relationships to persist across episodes. What is remarkable is the specific quality of the connections Lisa makes and loses. They are consistently with people who recognize what she is, who don't need it explained to them, who meet her where she actually is rather than where Springfield generally puts her, and they leave, because Springfield doesn't keep people like that. Season 23, Episode 9, Holidays of Future Past, Awash, which aired on December 11th, 2011, is an episode that the theory finds particularly significant because it is one of the most genuinely tender things the show has produced in its later run. It is a flash forward to a future where the kids are adults. Lisa has a daughter, Zia, who is gifted and difficult and isolated in the specific way that gifted and difficult children are isolated. Zia doesn't fit. She is too much for her environment. She can't find people who understand her. Sound familiar? The episode treats the parallel with a care that suggests the writers are aware of exactly what they're doing. Lisa looking at her daughter and seeing herself. Lisa understanding from the inside what it is to be that child in that position. And what the episode implies, without stating it directly, because stating it directly would require the show to say something it has been avoiding for 20 years, is that Lisa knows the cost. She knows what it costs to be the most capable person in a room that cannot accommodate your capabilities. She has been paying that cost her entire life, and now she is watching her daughter begin to pay it. She tries to help Zia. The episode resolves with a degree of warmth. The show does not fully sit with the implication. Here is the theory's central claim about Lisa, and it is a blunt one. Springfield cannot hold Lisa. Not because Springfield is evil, it's not, or not entirely, but because the environment is not compatible with what Lisa is. The town doesn't have the intellectual infrastructure, the cultural resources, the social conditions that would allow someone of Lisa's specific nature to thrive there. This has been true since the first season, and it has remained true through every subsequent season. Springfield is the wrong place for Lisa Simpson. She knows this. The show has been making sure she knows this for 35 years through every episode where she connects with something outside the town and then loses it. Through every episode where her intelligence isolates her rather than connecting her. Through every episode where she fights for something and wins or half wins, and then the episode resets and the win doesn't accumulate. And she stays. There are a few readings of why she stays, and they're not mutually exclusive. The first is the Lisa's wedding reading. She stays because she loves her family and because leaving would require her to accept that her family cannot follow her. And that is a grief she has not yet chosen to sustain. The second is darker. She stays because Springfield won't quite let her leave. Not through any active mechanism. The show is not a prison drama, but through the accumulation of small things that keep returning her to her starting position. The reset button that presses itself episode after episode, restoring her to the desk in the classroom in the house on Evergreen Terrace. The third reading is the one the theory finds most uncomfortable. Lisa stays because the show needs her to stay, because the show needs a conscience, and Lisa is it. And consciences don't get to have futures. A conscience that left would stop functioning as a conscience. It would just be a person somewhere else. The show requires Lisa to remain in contact with Springfield's specific failures and contradictions because without her in that position, who points it out? Who cares, consistently and articulately, about the things Springfield does wrong? Homer can't. Marge manages rather than challenges. Bart doesn't quite mean it when he does it. Lisa is the only character whose caring is structural rather than episodic, so she stays, and the saxophone comes out. There is an image that recurs across the series. Lisa at her bedroom window playing. Not performing, not for anyone, not in a context where the music is going to do something or lead somewhere. Just playing into the night from her window in a town that isn't quite listening. The show returns to this image because it is, on some level, the truest image it has of her. Not the school, not the causes, not the moments of triumph that the episode needs before it resets. The window, the music, the most capable person in Springfield sending her best work out into the dark and waiting to see if anything comes back. Nothing does, not in the way that holds. The theory's final word on Lisa is a quiet one. It is not angry on her behalf exactly. The show is not being cruel to her. It loves her in the way you can feel the show loving its characters when it has been with them long enough. But the love doesn't change the structure. The love and the cage can coexist. The show loves Lisa, and it keeps her in Springfield. Both things are true. And the question the theory leaves open is whether Lisa, who understands most things, understands that too, and what it means that she keeps playing the saxophone regardless. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The Simpsons will not officially end anytime soon. It has been renewed through season 40, a 4-season deal announced in April 2025, described by the people involved as a mega deal, which is not the kind of language used for a program approaching a natural conclusion. The economics of it are enormous, the audience still considerable, the property still generating revenue across streaming and syndication and merchandise at a scale that makes the calculus of ending it essentially impossible. The Simpsons is not going to end because The Simpsons ending would cost a very great deal of money to a very great many people. But the people making it are not corporations. They're writers and animators and directors who have spent, in some cases, 3 decades with these characters. And writers who have spent 3 decades with the same characters eventually need to say something true about them. They develop an understanding of what the character actually is underneath the format, underneath the joke requirements, underneath the weekly reset. They develop an ending in their heads. They may never be allowed to make it, but they have it. The theory holds that the evidence of that private ending, the one the show will never officially produce, has been accumulating in the margins of episodes for at least the last 15 years. That certain episodes, certain scenes, certain moments in later seasons carry the specific quality of work being done by people who know where this story would go if they were allowed to let it go. Season 23, Episode 9, Holidays of Future Past, which aired on December 11th, 2011, is the clearest single piece of evidence. It is a flash-forward episode that treats the characters' futures with more genuine care than almost any other episode in the show's run since the classic era. And the qualities that distinguish it from a standard later season Simpsons episode are precisely the qualities you would expect if the people writing it were being allowed, briefly, to do what they actually wanted to do with these characters. Homer and Marge are old. They have grown into their roles in the way that people actually grow into things, with wear and with accommodation and with the specific domestic intimacy that comes from decades of shared life in the same house. Homer is still Homer, but he is a version of Homer that has had time to become slightly more fully himself in some ways and slightly less capable in others. The comedy of him is still there, but it has a different texture, less of the chaos, more of the specific absurdity of an aging man who has never quite understood the world around him, but has made a genuine peace with that. In Holidays of Future Past, Bart has 2 sons. He is, according to the episode's logic, not a particularly good father, absent in some ways, unreliable in others. But he loves her in the way that people who didn't have great models for parenting love their children, which is genuinely and imperfectly and with more self-awareness about the imperfections than they had when they were children themselves. There is a moment in the episode between Bart and his daughter that is, for a Simpsons episode from this era, rather remarkable in its emotional precision. He doesn't quite know how to be what she needs, but he's trying in a way that the younger Bart never tried. The trajectory is visible. Lisa has a daughter who is gifted and isolated and who cannot communicate with her mother initially, precisely because they are too similar. 2 people who see everything clearly in an environment that doesn't accommodate clear vision, and who have spent so long managing their isolation separately that they don't know how to acknowledge it together. The episode resolves this. Lisa and Zaya connect, finally, over something small and specific and real. And the resolution is genuinely moving in a way that the show's later seasons are not always capable of. But the theory is not just about Holidays of Future Past. It's about what that episode represents in the context of the full catalog. It represents the show being briefly willing to do what it normally can't. Let these characters age. Let them carry the weight of what has happened to them. Let the past accumulate rather than reset. Season 34, Episode 3, Lisa the Boy Scout, is a different kind of evidence. It is a meta-episode, one of the show's increasingly frequent forays into self-examination, and it includes a direct mockery of the Homer coma dream theory, one of the most famous fan theories about the show, which proposes that the entire series is Homer's dream from a couch in 1992. The show mocks it. The writers clearly know the theory, they've lived with it. They produced an episode that addresses it directly, satirically, as part of a broader piece about the show's own legend and mythology. This kind of meta-awareness is not neutral. When a show that has been running for 34 seasons acknowledges, in the form of comedy, the theories about what it actually is, what it means, what it has been doing all this time, it is not simply being clever. It is reckoning with its own existence. It is doing the work of a show that has been alive long enough to develop a relationship with its own history. The mockery of the coma theory is also, in a specific sense, an engagement with the question behind the theory, which is, what is this show really? Not in terms of format or genre or production history, but in terms of what it has been doing with these characters all this time, what it means that they are still here, what it means that they haven't changed. Then there are the Homer and Lisa episodes of the middle to later seasons. These are scattered and inconsistent. The show's later seasons are inconsistent in a lot of ways. But within that inconsistency, there are specific episodes where the Homer-Lisa relationship is handled with a care that reads differently if you interpret it as the work of people who have been building toward a final word on this relationship for a long time. Lisa on Ice, Season 6, Episode 8. Homer Defined, Season 3, Episode 5, and what it says about what Homer's value system does and doesn't include. The quiet moments in later seasons where Homer does something right for Lisa, not by accident, not through chaos resolving in a convenient direction, but actually deliberately right, that are surrounded by enough noise that they slide past without the weight they might otherwise carry. Each of those moments is the show gesturing toward the version of Homer that lived briefly with an IQ of 105 and wrote a note to his daughter. The version that is still in there, still accessible in specific conditions, still capable of being the father that the note acknowledged he was failing to be. The show keeps surfacing him. Not enough to make the coma theory or the crayon theory or any of the other theories wrong, not enough to change the fundamental condition of Homer's life. Just enough to remind you that the capacity is there. And then there is what the theory calls the quiet accumulation of goodbye. Across the later seasons, certain long-running threads have been handled in ways that suggest a group of writers who are thinking about ends. Ned Flanders marrying Edna Krabappel, the show's pairing of its two great supporting emblems, the good man and the cynical woman, in a late career relationship that carries a specific weight of, this is the best these two people are going to get, and it is genuinely good. Edna's Death, Season 25, Episode 3, which aired on November 3rd, 2013. Written in response to the real death of Marcia Wallace, the voice actress, handled with the specific tenderness that the show can produce when it is not hiding behind comedy. Patty and Selma, who have been exactly who they are since the beginning, maintaining that exact configuration across the entire series, a consistency that has the quality of permanence. The theory is not claiming the writers are sneaking an ending past Fox. It is not claiming there is a hidden final episode being constructed in secret. What it is claiming is simpler and in some ways more moving than that. It is claiming that a group of people who have loved these characters long enough to understand them have been doing what writers always do when they're not allowed to end a story. They have been leaving traces of the ending in the work. Small, deniable, ambiguous traces. A tenderness here, a precision there, a moment between Homer and Lisa that carries more weight than the episode requires it to carry. An Abe Simpson scene that is funnier than it needs to be and sadder than the show admits. Season 28 onwards, the Homer-Marge relationship has been given periodic episodes that read like the show working through something it has been unable to say directly. That these two people have genuinely built something together. That the marriage, with all its chaos and dysfunction and the specific toll it takes on Marge that we discussed at length earlier, is also real. Not a comedic pairing, but an actual bond between two people who have been in each other's lives for long enough that the bond has become structural. You couldn't remove it without removing them. The ending the show is writing in the margins, the one it can't make officially, the one the economics of the franchise prevent. Goes something like this. Homer finally understands something fully, not through comedy, not through accident, but through the accumulated weight of decades of small moments that were all pointing in the same direction. Marge gets, briefly and privately, the peace that she has been managing around. Bart figures something out that he needed to figure out. Too late for it to change much, but not too late for it to mean something. Lisa leaves, not dramatically, just finally, and Maggie speaks. And what Maggie says makes sense of everything. The show will not make this episode. The Simpsons will continue past season 40, probably. The economics are too good and the cultural infrastructure is too embedded. Homer will still be at the plant, and Bart will still be in 4th grade, and the loop will continue running. But the ending exists. It has always existed. The writers have been leaving pieces of it in the footage for 20 years. Small, quiet, entirely deniable pieces. And if you watch carefully enough, if you know where to look, if you have spent enough time with these characters to hear the register they sometimes operate in underneath the jokes, you can see the shape of it. You can feel the story they wanted to tell if the story were allowed to end. That is not nothing. That is arguably the most human thing a piece of long-running art can do. Carry the truth of its own conclusion quietly, for as long as it takes, in the hope that someone is paying enough attention to find it. And before we get to the closing thoughts, there is one more thing worth spending time on. Not about any single character, but about the town that holds all of them. Springfield as a location is impossible. Not metaphorically impossible. Cartographically, topographically, geographically impossible. And the show knows this. It has been aware of it since the early seasons and has, over time, turned the impossibility from a production in continuity into something that functions more like a feature of the world being depicted. The geography of Springfield shifts, not slightly. Fundamentally, mountains appear in some seasons and are absent in others. The town has a coastline in certain episodes and is entirely landlocked in others. The distance from Springfield to other locations varies so dramatically depending on the episode that no consistent map of the region is possible. Fan attempts to construct a canonical Springfield geography, and there have been many over the years with varying degrees of obsessive detail. All eventually break down against the same wall. The show keeps contradicting itself in ways that cannot be reconciled onto a single map. The most famous example is West Springfield, Season 13, Episode 6. The Bart Wants What It Wants is not the relevant episode. What you want is Season 12, Episode 18, Trilogy of Error, and the various subsequent episodes that establish West Springfield as a distinct area. But it is Season 16's geography episodes and various Treehouse of Horror specials that produce the most extreme version of the problem. West Springfield is, at various points in the show's run, described as being roughly the size of Texas, or at least several times the size of Springfield itself. Springfield is a mid-sized American town. West Springfield cannot be both adjacent to it and the size of Texas. These are incompatible facts, and the show presents them without apparent concern for reconciliation. Then there is the state problem, which is the best-known version of the location mystery, and which the channel has covered in depth in other videos. Springfield is not in any named U.S. state. The show has maintained this ambiguity as a deliberate, creative choice since the beginning. Multiple states have been suggested, Several appear to have been confirmed in different episodes, and no single answer is consistent across the full run. At this point, the ambiguity has lasted so long and has been so thoroughly maintained that it functions less like a mystery to be solved and more like a property of Springfield itself. Springfield isn't just hard to locate, it's genuinely unlocatable. And the theory's reading of this is not that the writers were inconsistent, though they obviously were in specific instances. The theory's reading is that unlocatability is what Springfield is. That the town exists at a kind of remove from the fixed coordinates of the real world that allows it to be wherever the story needs it to be. Rural or urban, coastal or inland, proximate to major metropolitan areas or hours from anything, depending on what the episode requires. This is strange, and the strangeness accumulates over time into something that starts to feel intentional even if it wasn't originally. Consider the town's relationship with its own disasters. We touched on this in the floating timeline section. The way disasters reset, the way catastrophic events leave no mark on subsequent episodes. But the specifics are worth going through because the pattern of what Springfield survives and how it survives it is genuinely remarkable. Season 4, Episode 12, Marge versus the Monorail. The town builds a monorail at the instigation of a con man, uses it once, Homer drives it in a near disaster, it is presumably dismantled or abandoned. The next episode does not take place in a town that recently built and catastrophically misused a monorail system. Springfield doesn't carry the experience. Season 7, Episode 6. Bart's Comet. A comet is on course to destroy Springfield. The town shelters. The comet is destroyed. Life resumes. No subsequent episode takes place in a Springfield that recently experienced a near-extinction event. The comet is not part of the town's collective memory. Various Treehouse of Horror specials, not canonical technically, but formally part of the show's history, involve Springfield being destroyed, invaded, consumed, transformed, and ended in dozens of different ways. The show treats these as safe because they're out of canon, but the frequency with which the show returns to the premise of Springfield's destruction in the canonical run as well as the treehouse suggests something about how the writers understand the town. They understand it as a place that can be destroyed and rebuilt, that resists permanent ending. That has a specific kind of resilience that isn't quite the resilience of a real town, because real towns carry their disasters forward, but is instead the resilience of a container, something that holds the story rather than being the story. None of this requires a mystical framework. The container argument connects back to what the floating timeline section already established. Springfield is built to hold certain kinds of stories indefinitely, not to function as a real place in real geography. Its impossible layout and its disaster immunity are both properties of that design. The implications for the characters follow from that. Their inability to leave isn't just personal psychology, it's a property of the environment. The container holds. That's what containers do. And yet Springfield is also undeniably a place. It has specific streets and buildings that recur. It has institutions, the school, the plant, the church, Moe's Tavern, the town hall, that have developed personalities across the entire run. It has minor characters whose presence gives it the texture of somewhere real, of a community with its own internal dynamics and histories and relationships that exist independently of the Simpson family. The Simpsons are its most prominent residents, but they are not its only residents. Springfield has a life that goes on between and around the episodes, and that life, accumulated across decades of episodes, gives the town a specific gravity, a weight of having happened in. The jokes have history, the locations have associations. When Moe's Tavern appears in an episode, it carries the accumulated weight of every scene that has taken place in Moe's Tavern since season 1. When the school hallway appears, it carries everything Bart has ever done in that hallway. When Homer's car pulls into the driveway, it carries the thousands of times that sequence is played. Springfield is impossible as a location and absolutely real as a place. Both of those things are true, and the theory's final word on the town, which is also its final word on the show, is that this specific combination of impossibility and reality is what makes it work. What makes it possible to return to it season after season without it ever quite feeling like the same place twice or ever quite feeling like somewhere new. It is always slightly elsewhere and always somehow home. And that, at the end of all of it, might be the most precise description of what The Simpsons has always been trying to be. There are a handful of things that didn't get their own full sections, but that belong in this conversation in some form. Loose ends, if you like. The kind of observations that don't quite constitute a full theory on their own, but that add something to the picture we've been building, and that are worth spending a few minutes with before we close. And while we're here, Bart's situation deserves a bit more time because it's the version of the suppressed genius theory that the show has done the most work on without ever following through. We covered the suppressed genius theory in Section 6. The broad claim that the entire Simpson family has unusual cognitive capability that each member has, in different ways, chosen not to fully deploy. But Bart's case is worth returning to in a bit more detail because it's the version of the theory that the show has arguably done the most work on without ever quite following through. Bart's academic record is terrible. This is not in dispute and not part of any theory. It is straightforwardly true within the show's canon that Bart performs poorly at school, has been in 4th grade since 1989, and shows no signs of approaching 5th. The school has tried to address this in various ways over the years, some of them more charitable to Bart than others. Principal Skinner has written him off. Mrs. Krubopol had a complicated relationship with him that was eventually, in later seasons, characterized by something closer to wary mutual respect than the straightforward antagonism of the early years. The school knows Bart, Bart knows the school, the arrangement is settled. But here's the thing the theory keeps finding in the footage. Bart's failure at school is not the failure of someone who can't process information. It's the failure of someone who is processing information and making a specific choice about what to do with it. His pranks require planning. His schemes require a causal model of other people's behavior. He needs to be able to predict how specific adults will respond to specific stimuli, and he is consistently right about this. His ability to get out of situations he has created through pure social intelligence, reading the room, adjusting his presentation, identifying the most viable path through a complicated interpersonal mess, is, when you actually watch it, rather advanced. Season 6, Episode 7. Bart's girlfriend is a good place to see this working. Bart's approach to the Jessica Lovejoy situation involves a level of social modeling that the episode plays as romantic awkwardness, but that is, underneath, a demonstration of his ability to read another person's psychology and adjust his behavior accordingly. He gets it wrong ultimately because Jessica is operating at a level of manipulation that even Bart's social intelligence doesn't fully anticipate. But the capacity is visible in every step of the attempt. The theory's reading of Bart's academic failure is this: school, as Springfield delivers it, is not actually measuring what Bart can do. It is measuring Bart's willingness to perform compliance with a system he finds, correctly, entirely uninteresting. The things school rewards are the things Bart has decided, for reasons that probably go back to his early childhood, and the specific kind of attention he learned to get and not get in that household, not to pursue. The things Bart can actually do are not the things the school's measurement systems are designed to capture, which means his permanent 4th grade status is less a measure of his cognitive limits and more a measure of his position in a negotiation he's been having with the institutional world since he was 6 years old. A negotiation he has decided, in the way that very stubborn people decide things, to lose consistently on the school's terms rather than win on the school's terms and lose on his own. And then there's Frank Grimes, Season 8, Episode 23. Homer's Enemy, the highest rated episode in the show's history on IMDb, and possibly the clearest statement the show has ever made about what Springfield does to people who arrive with clear expectations. Season 8, Episode 23, Homer's Enemy, which aired on May 4th, 1997, is by most measures the best-rated episode in the show's history on IMDb. The premise involves a new employee at the plant, Frank Grimes, who is the show's most explicit attempt to introduce someone from the real world into Springfield's ecosystem. Grimes has worked hard for everything he has struggled, he has qualified himself properly, he has, in the specific terms of the meritocratic story we tell about how the world is supposed to work, done everything right. He arrives at the plant and meets Homer. The episode is a comedy, but the comedy is exceptionally dark. It is the comedy of a functional adult confronting the specific unreality of Homer's existence and finding that reality breaks before Springfield does. Grimes cannot understand how Homer has what he has. He cannot understand how the incompetence is rewarded, how the chaos is tolerated, how the man who should not be where he is continues, episode after episode, to be exactly where he is. And his inability to understand it destroys him. He is the only character in the show's run who looks at Springfield clearly, who sees it as it would appear to someone from outside. And the seeing is what kills him. This connects to everything the theory has been building about Springfield as a place. Grimes is not wrong about what he sees. His analysis of Homer is accurate. His analysis of the plant is accurate. His analysis of the reward structures in Springfield, who gets what and why and on what basis, is accurate. And accuracy in Springfield is fatal. The town doesn't reward seeing clearly. It doesn't accommodate the perspective of someone who arrived from outside with the expectation that the world works the way the world is supposed to work. It simply continues being Springfield, and the person who cannot reconcile themselves to that eventually breaks against it. The theory's reading of Homer's Enemy is that it is the show's most direct statement of what Springfield does to people who arrive with clear vision. The floating timeline, the reset, the impossible geography, the disaster immunity. These are not features that a clear-eyed observer can absorb and normalize. They require a specific kind of acclimation, a specific willingness to let the logic of the place override the logic you brought with you. The people who have been in Springfield their whole lives have this acclimation. The town grew them. Grimes didn't have it, and the show, with unusual frankness for a half-hour comedy, showed you what happens to someone who doesn't. Every Springfield resident who has ever seemed slightly too aware of their situation, who has momentarily seen the town the way Grimes saw it, has eventually been absorbed back into the pattern or, like Grimes, removed from the story entirely. The acclimation is not optional. Springfield requires it. There's a specific kind of intelligence Grimes represents. The intelligence of someone who arrived at a situation with clear expectations about how the world works and found the situation simply refused to comply. He is not wrong about Homer. He is correct about Homer in every particular detail. Homer has what he has not through merit, not through competence, not through any mechanism the world Grimes grew up believing in would recognize as fair. Homer has it because Springfield produces Homers and accommodates them. The town is organized around the kind of person Homer is, not the kind of person Grimes is. And Grimes, who had worked extremely hard to be the kind of person the world is supposed to reward, could not absorb that. Not through cruelty, not through anything dramatic, just the sheer grinding incompatibility between what he believed and what Springfield demonstrably was. The show called the episode Homer's Enemy, but Grimes' real enemy wasn't Homer. It was the gap between the story he'd been told about how things work and the evidence in front of him that they didn't work that way at all. The theories we've been discussing tonight are, in a sense, the view from outside that same acclimation. The Grimes perspective, applied carefully and without the fatal seriousness that destroyed him. which is maybe why they work best at this hour, at the pace of someone who has nothing urgent to resolve, someone who can hold the strangeness of the place without needing to fix it, someone who can watch it the way Maggie watches it and simply be present for what it is. One last thing, and then we're done. Moe's Tavern. There is something about Moe's Tavern that the show has never quite said directly, but has been implying since season 1. Moe Szyslak has been running that bar for as long as the show has existed. He has been there every time Homer has walked through the door. He has picked up the phone for every prank call, fewer in recent seasons, but the ritual persists. And he has mixed every drink and absorbed every conversation and remained, all these years, in the same position behind the same bar, in the same dimly lit room. He is, in some ways, the most stable thing in Springfield. Not the most stable person. Moe's interior life is visibly complicated in ways the show has returned to periodically across its run. But the bar is stable. Moe behind the bar is stable. In a town where the geography shifts and the timeline floats and the reset button presses itself, Moe's Tavern is always there, always open, always the same. The theory about Ma is quiet and a bit sad and doesn't require elaborate architecture to make the case. It simply asks, why is Ma still here? He has had opportunities across the show's run to move, to change, to be something other than what he is. Several episodes have given him moments of genuine warmth or possibility, relationships that could have developed, situations that could have become something, and none of them held. The bar is always waiting. The bar is always what he goes back to. The theory's reading is that Ma and the bar are each other's trap. The bar needs him because a bar needs someone behind it, and this particular bar in this particular town has needed Moe behind it since before the show started. And Moe needs the bar because Moe is a man who has, for reasons the show gestures at across the run without fully explaining, decided that this is as far as his life goes. Not with drama, not with a decisive moment of resignation. Just the gradual, accumulating decision that this is the place and this is the role, and the next day he will do it again. He is the character who makes the loop most visible. Not Homer. Homer's loop is driven by obliviousness, by the crayon, by the managed condition we discussed at length. Homer doesn't know he's looping. Moe knows. Moe has the specific, tired self-awareness of someone who has been in the same place long enough to see the loop from the outside, who picks up the phone for the prank call and knows it's coming and does it anyway, who refills the glass and wipes the bar and closes up and opens again. The show has given Moe moments of genuine depth across its run. Some of the most surprisingly moving scenes in the later seasons involve Moe in situations where the comedy drops away and something real surfaces briefly before the register returns to comedy. He is not simply a background character, he is a man with a full interior life, a history, a set of genuine experiences and genuine losses that the bar absorbs and the bar holds. And the bar will be there tomorrow, and Moe will be behind it. That is not finally a dark observation, or not only a dark one. There is something about the permanence of Moe's Tavern, about the specific reliability of that dim room and those sticky bar tops, and the man who's been standing behind the same counter since 1989, and that is, in the context of everything we have discussed tonight, actually a small kind of comfort. Springfield resets, the timeline shifts, the town survives its disasters and forgets them. But Moe's is open, the next round is available. Homer can walk through that door and take his stool and the evening can proceed. Not everything that doesn't change is a trap. Some things that don't change are just there, steady, available, in the same place they were last time. And sometimes that is exactly what you need. There's a moment in the opening sequence of The Simpsons, the same sequence that has run in variations since December 17th, 1989, where Homer Simpson comes home. He has been to the plant, he has done his day, He pulls into the driveway and he goes through the door, and the family assembles on the couch, and the cat and the dog land somewhere. And Maggie gets passed back to Marge by Homer, and everyone settles. The sequence has been updated over the years. The HD version introduced in season 20 made it longer, more elaborate, added gags and cameos and details that reward repeated viewing. The music has been reorchestrated. The couch gag at the end is different every episode and has been one of the most reliably inventive creative spaces in the show's entire run. But the essential shape of the sequence, Homer leaving work, coming home, the family arriving from their separate days, the settling onto the couch, has not changed since the very beginning. You've seen it hundreds of times if you've watched the show for any length of time, probably thousands. And there is something in that repetition that sits underneath the theories we've been discussing tonight in a way that's worth sitting with for a moment before we wrap up. The theories change how you watch the people in that sequence. The crayon makes Homer's easy obliviousness heavier. The gene question makes the plant in the background of that drive home more ominous. Ned Flanders's goodness, understood as a construction rather than a natural state, gives his cheerful wave across the fence a slightly different quality. Marge's functional performance of contentment, the management she's been doing her whole life, you see the shape of it differently once you've named it. Lisa with her saxophone, Maggie watching, Bart arriving on his skateboard with the specific lightness of a child who has decided at some fundamental level not to be what the world is trying to make him. The theories don't destroy the show. That's worth saying. A theory that makes something unwatchable isn't doing its job properly, and none of the ones we've gone through tonight do that. They make the show heavier in places. They make certain scenes carry more weight than the format intends them to carry. But they also make the show more interesting, more genuinely interesting, in the way that things become more interesting when you understand them more fully. Homer is sadder than he looks if the crayon theory is right. He is also more courageous in a specific and backward way. The courage of someone who looked at what it would take to be fully present in their own life and decided the cost was manageable, and then found out it wasn't and made a decision that they knew was wrong, and that allowed them to keep going anyway. That's not a simple thing. That's not just stupidity. That's a man navigating impossible competing requirements with the limited tools he has. We all do some version of this. Homer's version is more visible than most. Marge is more complicated than she looks if the quiet crisis theory is right. She's also more impressive. To sustain what she sustains, the management, the performance, the genuine love underneath both, across every season, and the specific grinding difficulty of being the load-bearing wall of that household, takes something that doesn't have a simple name. It's not just patience, it's a specific combination of love and stubbornness and the decision, made repeatedly and never finally, to stay and make it work and get through the day and try again tomorrow. Ned is more real than he looks. His cage is real, and his pain is real, and the goodness is also real, because the two things can coexist. A personality that was installed rather than developed can still be a genuine personality. The person who lives inside the installation is still a person. Whatever came out in the parking lot and went back under is still Ned. It is just the part of Ned that Springfield doesn't know what to do with. Sideshow Bob is the most tragic figure in the Springfield ecosystem, if the theory is right. Not because of what he's done. He has, it's worth acknowledging, attempted to kill a child, which is not a small thing, but because of what produced the situation in which those attempts became the primary available outlet for his particular nature. He is an argument against something, though the show has never quite decided what. Against the failure of environments to accommodate the people they produce, maybe. Against the specific cruelty of having capabilities that exceed what your circumstances allow you to use. Against the loop that runs and keeps returning him to the same place. And Lisa with her saxophone in the window playing to nobody. The show has never let go of her. It has given her more than most of its characters in some ways. More interior life, more genuine stakes, more episodes where the thing she cares about actually matters. But it has also kept her in Springfield, in the house, at the same desk, with the same family, in the same town that cannot hold her. And it has done this not out of malice, but out of necessity. The show needs her there. The story needs her there. And there is something in that need, something in the specific truth that the most capable person in the story is also the most structurally trapped, that says something about how stories work and maybe about how life works too. The show has been writing its ending in the margins, quietly, undeclared, spread across late season episodes in moments of unusual tenderness and precision. The ending where Homer finally understands something fully, the ending where Marge gets her piece, the ending where Bart's trajectory arrives somewhere, the ending where Lisa leaves and Maggie speaks. It will probably never be made. The economics are too good and the institutional infrastructure is too large. Homer will be at the plant next season and the season after that, and probably for longer than either of us wants to think about. But here's the thing about The Simpsons that the theories taken together keep pointing back to. It is a show about people who stay, not because they can't leave. Some of them could leave probably in the right circumstances, but because the thing that holds them is real. The family is real. The love in that house, which is also dysfunction and damage, and the specific ordinary tragedy of people who care about each other but are not always capable of showing it, is real. The theories can make it heavier. They can name the mechanisms and the cost, but they can't make it false. Homer goes home every episode. He comes through the door, the family assembles, the couch receives them, the cat and the dog find their spots. Maggie is passed back to Marge. And whatever is true about any of these people, the crayon, the gene, the cage, the management, the quiet crisis, the suppressed intelligence, the designed incompetence, the loops and the resets, and the time that moves in ways it shouldn't, all of it is contained in that image. The family on the couch, the evening outside the window, the music settling. We have been watching them for 35 years. We were children when we started, most of us, or we weren't yet born, or we came to it later and caught up on the reruns. We have watched them in living rooms with people we loved, and in student flats, and in hospital waiting rooms, and at 2 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. We have watched them enough times that certain lines arrive before they're spoken, certain gags land before the setup lands, certain pieces of music carry full rooms of memory in them. And they haven't changed. That is the point. That is, if you sit with it, the thing the theories are really about, not the dark readings or the psychological mechanisms or the conspiracy of the plant or the instability of time in Springfield. Those are the surface. Underneath them is the question of what it means that we've watched the same family through all of this and they haven't aged, haven't grown, haven't resolved, haven't ended. Why does that feel like something? Maybe because it is something. Maybe because the specific relief of returning to a place that doesn't change, of knowing that Homer is still going to come through that door and the couch is still going to catch them and the loop is still going to run, is a relief we need. Not forever. Not as a replacement for lives that move and change and accumulate the way lives are supposed to, but sometimes, on the nights when the change has been too much, when the accumulation has been too heavy, when what you need is something that will simply be what it always was. The Simpsons has been what it always was through all of this. It has done this for millions of people in hundreds of countries, in 600 and whatever episodes of the same family in the same town going through the same loops. And if the theories are right, if Springfield is a place where time works differently, where the past doesn't hold, where the reset is permanent and the loop is real, and the people inside it are carrying more than they appear to be carrying, then maybe that's not an accident. Maybe the loop is the point. Maybe the thing the show has been doing all along is exactly what it feels like it's doing, holding still for as long as it can so that we can come home to it. Maggie is still on the couch. She's still watching, She has always been watching. And if the theory is right about her, if the most capable person in that household has been quietly, deliberately choosing to appear passive, then maybe the best reading of that final image in the opening sequence is not that she's a baby who doesn't speak yet. Maybe it's that she's seen all of this before, that she knows exactly how this goes, and that she has decided, with the intelligence the show keeps almost showing you, to simply be present for it, without urgency, without agenda, just watching. Just here, the way, if we're honest,